We're good. Hey guys, welcome to another episode of R-Rated Christianity. Sorry for the late start; it's my fault. Today's going to be a shorter episode, so to speak. George is with his family, and today is my much better half's birthday, Davi's birthday, and my brother-in-law's birthday. So I don't know how my in-laws planned that. 7 years apart, or six or 7 years apart. No, 7 years apart on the same day. So happy birthday to my angel, to my wife Davida, and my brother-in-law Carlos. Happy birthday. We just came from his house celebrating a little bit. Now the kids are doing the homework. George with his family. I was going to cancel. I was going to try to take her out to dinner, but that didn't work out. So hopefully we'll do it another time. So I wanted to wish my wife a very happy and blessed birthday. I wanted to brag about her a little bit tonight. Like I said, I was going to do a video and cut it short, but I wanted to just talk about the importance of marriage and the importance of your spouse and affirming and supporting your spouse. Look, Davi is a champ in our house. I mean, you guys know I brag about her all the time. I mean, we have 4 children. Michael, our son, our second oldest, is on the spectrum of autism. We're going through a very challenging season with him right now. And she's a warrior, man. She's a beast. She steps up. She serves. She goes without sleep. She puts up with hitting and pulling sometimes. I mean, that's just the way we both do. But I mean, she's the one that she's the foundation of it all. And so, I was talking about marriage to a friend of mine the other day, and your spouse and your dedication in a biblical marriage versus a secular marriage. I'm not going to go through a whole thing on it, but um, you know, Davi has been through everything with me. She's been through politics. She's been through when we first got married. I was still an angry son of a bitch from my brother's murder. I was kind of still in the tunnel at that time. She loved me through that. She was When we got married a week before I witnessed the execution of my brother's murder. It was a challenging season, starting off out the gate, and she had no idea what she was signing up for. But she made a commitment to God and to me, and she loved me through it. And I'm better for it. I mean, she makes me a better person. So I honor her every chance I get, not only because I want to, because she deserves it, but because it's biblical. And so I spoke. I had the privilege. I'm going to shift course a little bit. I had the privilege of speaking at CBC 2 weeks ago to about 1,000 men on a Monday night, and my topic was being frustrated with God. I told the guys that I almost got off that topic, and then I felt the Lord reminded me, because that's when Michael really started this challenging season. About 10 days before that, I was going to speak on something else, and I just got this. I felt like it was a reminder that no, stick to that topic, and I really dug into that topic. I've spoken on that topic before to our men's Bible study. It's a passionate topic for me because I've walked through a number of seasons and challenges. Some BC, before Christ, some with Jesus. Very different response versus reaction when I went through both of them. But Davi was with me through most of them, through politics, which sucks. A bunch of fake ass people in that arena. Just and I'm passionate about politics, advocating for heaven. Davi didn't know what she was signing up for. We definitely, neither one of us knew we were signing up for raising a special needs child, which we don't regret. It's a privilege to be his parents. But there are times where if you're not careful, well, there's nothing wrong with being frustrated with God. I took the men through Jeremiah 20. When you weren't there. Thanks for not showing up, Tyler. But I'm joking. Jeremiah 20, Numbers 11, through what Moses went through, what Jeremiah went through. He was a mess. It was like a emotional roller coaster. Through what Paul went through, John the Baptist and his questions, even what Jesus modeled in Matthew 26 when he's in the garden. And it's okay to be frustrated with the Lord. It's okay to ask him questions. He can deal with it. It's okay to express your frustration. Dare I say, be offended by God. I shared with some of the men. I'm not. I've gotten past that now, but there are times of frustration. And you want to keep it to yourself. Vent it to God. We've been praying. Davi and I made a commitment this year. George and Stephanie is the ones that told us about this, but where we all had used to do a fast, a prayer fast, and it doesn't mean that we abstain from praying. We actually pray every day together in January. George and Stephanie do it. Davi and I have been doing it for about 5 years. George and Stephanie longer. This year during January, Davi and I were praying. It was probably mid-January, and I just said, Chula is a term of endearment in Spanish. I go, Chula, I really feel like we're supposed to pray every day together this year. I said it, couldn't take it back. I kind of regretted saying it at first, jokingly, and she says, okay. And
and you do it.
And we do it every night.
And you do it
4 times. I think it's 4 times now. My stupid ass is falling asleep, and she's nudging on me, and then we pray in the morning. So we'll do a double tomorrow. And it's not a militant thing; it's a commitment thing. We made a commitment. We made a promise to the Lord to pray through tough times, and we just have conversations. Sometimes they're 2, 3, 4, 5 minutes long. Sometimes they're 20. It just depends. And we made that commitment, and obviously, over the last 3 or 4 weeks, the main focus has been Michael and our perspective and how we look at it. And all that comes through the prism and through the covenant of marriage. For me, I think the Lord is, sanctifies us, using our spouses to do that. I mean, obviously, if you're equally yoked, I mean, you can have a situation where you're not equally yoked. And George and I have talked about that in the past, and then that's a completely different journey. But I mean, all of this to say, I'm just kind of giving you a thought dump, guys, because I was thinking about Davi all day today, and I was thinking, well, Tyler, let's just talk for a little while, and we'll get off and let everybody have their evening back, including myself. I'll go inside and maybe help a little bit at the end of the evening. But I was just thinking about, Romans 13 says to give honor to honor is due. And on a birthday, we celebrate people's life. Another, what is it? Another round around the sun, or what do they say?
Yeah,
another trip around the sun. Yeah. But it truly is a situation. We shouldn't wait for birthdays to do that. But Davi deserves the honor that, her students, she does a group instruction. Her students honor her today, which she did. I mean, it made her feel good. She needs that B12 shots. We all do. We all need that encouragement. Paul needed it, and that's why he had Barnabas, and that what literally means is an encourager. But
while he was sitting in prison,
you can talk in the mic probably.
While he was sitting in prison, yeah.
Well, look, Paul went through some shit. We've talked about that. 2 Corinthians 11:16, all the way down. Read Paul's resume. It's a tough resume. And so what Davi and I, what we do is we've changed our prayer life in the sense of a tweak. And I shared this with the men 2 Mondays ago at CBC. We call it that no matter what trust, that no matter what faith. I shared with them an interview, and I might have shared this with you on the show. If I did, bear with me. Greg Laurie was interviewing Chuck Smith. Chuck Smith is that pastor that's the subject of that Jesus Revolution that I have not seen. And Chuck Smith is at the end of his life. Greg, and you can find that on YouTube. Greg Laurie's interviewing him, and Greg asked, and Chuck had lung cancer by this time, and it's been a slow process from what I understand. And Greg goes, Chuck, are you ever angry at God? You ever get just angry or frustrated with him because of what you're dealing with, your cancer and how your life's ending? And in a very sweet, gentle, but just firm voice, he says, oh no. He had this kind of really neat pastoral voice. Oh no, I've had a good life. Something like that. I'm going to bastardize what he said, unfortunately. But this is the takeaway for me. He said, I trust God knows what's best for me, and I want what God wants. That really had a profound effect on me. I mean, it changed my prayer life. I mean, I've heard this, it's been some time now, but when I heard that comment, it's what we believe. It's really a Job assessment. Job, when Job says, I came to the world naked, I'm going to leave this world naked. The Lord gives, the Lord takes away. Blessed be the name of the Lord. It's a statement of trust, of his sovereignty, of his wisdom, of his character. And so Chuck said, I trust God knows what's best for me, and I want what he wants. I mean,
is that like a level of trust and letting go that like you see a guy like him and his stature and seeing that, and it kind of like helps further that trust in God? Or
well, I think it's an example of a man who's fully persuaded by what he'd been preaching for decades. I mean, because it doesn't get any more real than that. The road's over on this side of heaven. Do you really believe what you believe? And he modeled it for people. He modeled. I hate using the word die, not because I don't like using that word, because we don't die. I mean, we move on, we transition, we pass on. There's a different life. We're eternal. Everyone's eternal. It's where you spend eternity that is really the issue. But Chuck just said, I trust he knows what's best for me. If this is what's best for me, and I like to add in our prayer, for me, for us, and our family, our children, our children's children. And
That's good.
so, but just Davi's been a tremendous support. She's when I was in office for those 4 years and 5 years with campaigning, I mean, I was gone a lot. I mean, a lot, way too much. And she just held down the fort. And Michael was younger, and he was going through some therapies, and she's running the kids everywhere, and they were younger. Maya is going to be 15, so she's a huge help now, and even Leah at 10 is a huge help. It's either at 7. There's just much more mature.
Growing up fast.
Well, they had to with Michael, right?
Yeah.
And so she went through it. I mean, she doesn't complain about it. She never has. But so it's just a neat thing. I wish I could have given her a more relaxing, birthday day, and we can always celebrate it another time. But kids were in school, they had jujitsu, they're running all over the place. Sophia is no longer with us, and so it was just a different time. We stopped by Carlos's house to wish him happy birthday. Also, came back home, and it's homework and this and dinner plans got nixed. Tyler volunteered to stay on guard and be close by if we wanted to grab dinner. But Michael had a rough day early on, and he seems to be peaceful now. I'm not there, I don't know, but that's all. I just wanted to kind of brag about Davi a little bit on the air. I think she deserves it.
Yeah, and I'll just say, just the marriage and just watching the marriage, pretty closely and doing life with you. I mean, I think that any couple slash someone getting married or young couple would want to, try to mimic a marriage like yours and Davi's, and I obviously been picking your brain and try and learning from example, but man, what's the secret? Like, what do you,
Well,
what's, what,
first of
what
all, I'm
is it?
humbled by that. The secret is acknowledging that you're broken and submitting to Christ, and then praying that. Well, because Davi and I, I asked her to marry me after 3 months. I mean, I was 33. I knew what I wanted. I'd never been engaged before, never married, obviously, no kids. And I did this courtship, old school. I went to my in-laws' house. They were only here for a little while. Talk about a divine appointment. My in-laws were here just to try a new season in life, a new business venture with family members.
In a new city that
New
they
city.
didn't
Oh,
know.
they lived in Mexico and Los Mochis, and so that my father and my suegro said, "Hey, I want all my kids in town." So try to convince Davi to come to town, and she was finishing up her school in California, and David was somewhere else, and Carlos was back in Mexico, and Diana was and so they all came down here, and they went back, and except for Carlos and Davi stayed here. But I saw the family close up. Every night I'd go over there after work and late, and we kind of just hang out in the living room, all of us. I mean, the cousin Hugo was here, David, Carlos, Diana, my in-laws, my suegros, and Davi, and we just, every once in a while we'd sneak out and grab some dinner somewhere and come back or catch a movie. But it was kind of that old school.
Mm.
And so I just said, this is a good crop of folks. So I asked her to marry me in 3 months, and then 3 months later we were married. So within 6 months of me meeting her, we were married.
Yeah.
Met her in December. We were married in July.
It's
And
impressive.
that's
not normal.
Well, no, it's not. But I mean,
Especially not in 2023.
I mean, she's the one that took more of a chance than me. I mean, poor thing. But and then we get back from the wedding, and then I'm going off to Huntsville to witness an execution, and there was a lot of anger and unforgiveness still in my heart, and I was working through a lot, didn't on my own, and she loved me through it. But you just nobody lived together before that. You just really. But I had submitted myself to Christ by that time in my walk, to answer your question, and knowing that the fleshy Nico would have screwed this deal up, But by that time, I was fully persuaded by Christ. Obviously I wasn't as close with him as I am now. I was 17 years removed from this. I was earlier on in my walk. I wasn't early, but earlier, definitely in my walk. But I just made a decision that my way sucks. I've shown that over and over again in my life, and I was going to try to do things Christ's way. I was persuaded that he was who he says he was. The Bible's, reliable. Those 66 books can be depended on. And I was convinced of it. And so that's me battling my feelings often, not doing it perfectly, but looking at the person who is perfect. And then Davi, not trying to jock for position. She wasn't trying to win. We never tried to win one over on each other. I think that's part of the key. You're not, if you have a couple that's jockeying for position, what are you jockeying for? Scripture says you're one flesh. If you're in Christ, right? If you're in one flesh, and you don't jock with position with your flesh, you're one. And so
But how do you get there?
well,
How do you get there?
I can't say that we were there initially. We did premarital counseling with our church at the time. So we did some responsible things. I think that for me, I think Davi had a great example in her parents. I had a
Mm,
great example in my parents. My parents are still, still married today. My pop will be 87, God willing, in January. I think it's 50. Well, Mike would have been, I'm 51 soon, 53, 55 years that they've been married. Tough times, in the sense of, having a child taken from you, and you go through a lot, and there's no equation on how to deal with stuff like that. Just that it was, look, my life is messy. That's why, hence the podcast, it's R-rated. Life is R-rated, and you got some religious stiffwads out there that, you just, it's just, life is tough, man. And, that's the message to the men on Monday, that you can be real and raw and have that R-rated faith, just real and raw, redemptive to Christ, And I told the men, I challenged them, the more R-rated your faith is, and I'm not talking about using slang words. I'm just saying the more real and raw your faith is, the more G-rated your life becomes.
mm.
Because you're persuaded, because you're real. You're not putting on a show. So many people think they can put on a show for Christ, for God. I mean, and they're just bullshitting themselves, not Him. And so, I believe it's God's provision. I mean, His divine appointment with Davi. Um, feel blessed. I mean, because I deal with crappy situations for a living in my profession. I just feel blessed. I wasn't lucky. I was blessed. I felt blessed. Davi's personality and her commitment to a family, to me, to our marriage, to my vision. When I got into politics, she didn't sign up for that. I mean, this Christian hippie chick with a nose ring, and just kind of being herself. And she got into politics and had to deal with all the backstabbing and bullshit that politics brings, unfortunately. But together we've grown in our faith, in our marriage, her in her own relationship with Christ. I think each individual in a marriage has to have their own relationship with Christ, and then bring it together as one. Because can't force it on. And that's one thing I'm glad I didn't do. I didn't force it on Davi. I didn't, because I was passionate about Jesus. I was early on in my faith, and I was, just the way I get, and
On fire.
on fire, yeah. But I knew enough to know that if I really wanted it to be genuine with Davi, not that she didn't have a relationship, but it definitely was nowhere close to where it is now. It needed to be organic, and so I thank God I submitted myself to that prompting from the Holy Spirit, not to shove it in her face, and I just tried to do my best to model it for her. And I think she saw this sanctification process of me, with my temper, with my unforgiveness, with everything as time went on. Um, and so that here we are. So she deserves. I mean, every time I brag about her, I mean it. So it's her birthday.
Yeah.
So happy birthday, Chula. She's probably not watching. She's putting the kids to sleep.
She is a gracious, gracious person.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you want to jockey for position with her, um, but with God, I guess you don't have to. I mean, ultimately, we have to jockey for position with God ourselves first,
Yeah.
right? I mean, that's where we're at, and then I feel like maybe once we can, give up that fight and get on our knees, and ultimately, He's the one that shows us. Now, this is the servant. This is the servitude. The servant heart that we have to have towards our wife, towards our husband, towards others, right?
Yeah. Well, but see, this is why I'm so passionate about the way that I talk and analyze and reason through our faith. What I see in the justice system, what I see when I talk to men's groups, especially, I mean, men are hungry for truth. They're hungry for genuineness and authenticity. They're hungry for it. And if you present the gospel in a raw way, just real and authentic and logical, because it just is logical. You don't have to worry about a false convert, because they've been presented the honest gospel in a way that's real and raw. The
No
way the
trickery.
well, there's and not, you don't have to clean up the gospel.
Mm.
It's perfect. It's just dirty. Not it. People. We're dirty. We're jacked up. I mean, have you got to work hard to make that book boring. From the old, from Genesis and Jude and Judah and all the. I mean, there's some crappy shit in there all the way through Judges and then to the New Testament. I mean, these are just. I mean, David and I mean, just it's just jacked up, and I love it. It encouraged me when I first started studying it instead of reading it. And I think that's I just really believe it needs to be now. Of course, you use discernment whenever I'm behind a pulpit. I'm not using the slang words I use on the podcast here. And that's what Ephesians 4:29 talks about. Use some common sense, understand your audience. But when I'm doing prison ministry, it's one thing. If I'm talking to a men's group, it's another thing. If I'm behind a pulpit at a church, it's another thing. If I'm doing a couples ministry thing, I mean, but the message is the same, the passion is the same. I mean, the presentation maybe on verbiage is a little different, but you're going to still get the same message and the same Nico. So I just think we get really goofy about it, and I think that we have an identity crisis in the church. It's very apparent to me, or else
Well,
we
because
wouldn't.
people think that, like people, the way people view Christians is like you always say. I'm going to use different terminology. We're, you know, hell no, you use it the best way. We're sitting around a circle, petting a lamb,
Lamb.
and singing "Kumbaya," and this is kind of what Christianity is. It's like, hey, when you want to go, you know, tame down, you know, then go be a Christian.
Yeah, I
But
mean,
that's like
that's
it's
not the that there's nothing in there like that. Jesus was, he was, some people like say Jesus, was a gangster. I mean, look, he went against the norm. He did not conform to the patterns of this world, like Paul said, right? Romans 12. I mean, he wasn't trying to be anything other than genuine, authentic, but bold. I mean, he kicked ass in the temple, told off the Pharisees in Matthew 23. He used some verbiage that I'm sure you wouldn't use from a pulpit if you understand the hermeneutics and the translation of it. But I mean, I was fascinated by him. I'm fascinated him by still today. I marvel in him, and sometimes I don't understand what he's doing, but I don't have to. And that's why Chuck Smith's prayer or his comment changed my prayer life when I say, Lord, I just trust your character that you know what's best for me,
mm,
and I want what you want. That's it. Because he's playing, remember, look, you got to think about this, guys. The Lord, if we believe what we believe, he's playing eternal chess. He's thinking of three moves. We're thinking of the now. He's thinking of, well, how will this affect your grandkids? How will this affect generations down the road? How will this affect your immediate children? What's going to happen? Will you
mm,
be submissive?
mm.
Will you be obedient? I mean, that's what he's doing. He's not worried about our feelings. Your feelings are irrelevant to a parent. They should be. Not irrelevant, but they should not be your primary focus. Your maturity should be your primary focus. And so God cares about our maturity. So that's, I mean, once you change that perspective, it helps you walk through life differently. And that's what I was shared with the men when I talked about frustrations with God. Man, you should have seen, and you were there the last time.
Yeah.
Men came up in tears. Said, "This is the message. I really needed this." And this is where they question their faith. The church doesn't answer their questions. They don't understand that the scriptures have all the answers, and they'll walk away under a false pretense. Some people come to Christ under false pretense. Other people will leave under false pretense, and that's unfortunate. And so that's why I'm so passionate about being real and raw, hopefully leading to a redemptive relationship with the King of Kings. And so, any comments or questions before I jump off? I
I
want to make
mean,
sure.
George is
George who? Smith or
Holmes.
George Holmes?
Mm-hmm.
Hey, George. Okay.
He just says Christianity today is an organized, ungodly religion and has nothing to do with the teachings of Jesus Christ or guiding principles of Scripture.
I would not. I think I know what he means by that. I wouldn't use that blanket statement for all churches, but I understand what he's saying. I mean, I think he's alluding to the fact that less and less people identify as Christians today, down from lower 90% decades ago to 63% now, which sucks. And then out of that 63%, somewhere around 4% of the 63% of Americans have a biblical worldview. It's like, what the hell are you doing? What the hell why are you calling yourself a Christian if you don't have a biblical worldview? What does that mean? Why don't you have a biblical worldview? So if that's what he's referencing to, I understand what he means by that, and it's unfortunate. So we have a lot of work to do. Forget about outside the church and trying to find unsaved people. There's plenty of unsaved people in the church.
Mm-hmm.
That's Revelations 3:15. It's not Nico LaHood. He's talking to Laodicea when you talk about, John is writing about Jesus talking to the church at Laodicea. And he's saying, you guys make me sick. I'm going to throw you up. Wish you were either hot or cold. You're lukewarm. You're checking off the boxes. There's a lot of people that go to church that are going to go to hell, unfortunately, but it's a fact. It's not me. It's Jesus. Matthew 7.
Well,
It's all
and
in there.
thank God that a loving God would would honor good and be just, and
He doesn't
justice
honor
is,
good because what's good?
well,
Yeah,
he is good.
right. But we just look. We have to submit ourselves. There's three aspects to saving faith: knowledge, assent, and trust. Knowledge. Does it make sense? What you're telling me about this transcendent being who entered into, yeah, it makes sense. That makes sense. I don't know if I believe it, but it makes sense. Assent. I do believe it. It makes sense. I understand it, and I believe it. Okay. Well, the demons believed it too, right? Legion talked about it. He even called Jesus who he was before he said, "Please don't get rid of us. What are you going to do to us?" And then he threw him into the pigs or whatever. But so knowledge, assent, and here's the part that I think the church is struggling with: trust. Do we hand over governorship to Christ? Is he the Lord? Meaning he gets to decide how we live our lives. So knowledge is wonderful. Understanding is wonderful. Belief, great. You need those two. But the last one is trust. Do we hand over lordship and governorship? And that's the part that's unfortunately I think we're falling straight on our ass. Any other comments, criticisms?
Yeah, that's it.
That's it.
The
Nothing else.
church never has answers.
Got George again?
No, somebody
Mm.
else.
Well, not every
People.
church. I mean, I hope we don't talk about. We don't want to look. I think there's some churches doing it right. We've talked about it. Hillside Fellowship, Pastor Dave Tooker. Ed Newton, Pastor Ed's doing a wonderful job at CBC. Not just because they asked me to speak over there, I wouldn't go over there if I didn't believe in what their mission was there. I mean, and other churches too. It's not just those two. We've had Pastor Flowers on the show with us before, and other pastors that are bold and are I think are getting bolder. I think I'm seeing more and more pastors see the consequences of of kind of watering down the gospel. You got to do it in a loving way. I'm not saying be a dickhead, right? That's the 11th commandment. Don't be a dickhead. But that's my commandment. But it's in there somewhere. I promise you, it's in Exodus. But all I'm saying is we got to present the gospel in a bold way, but in a gracious way. And I often say grace without truth without grace comes across harsh, and most people love that. But then I say, but grace without truth is deception, and that's where the church I think is overcorrected. All this grace, grace, grace. I mean, okay, unmerited favor, strength. Okay, what does that mean? But then you don't give any truth, and then you got a false gospel. You can't give a partial presentation of Jesus. What was it?
So Mike Martin says he's had problems with prayers and seems most pray for selfish things or things that ultimately make their lives easier. I see prayer as thanks to God for his blessings, but even then I wonder if I'm praying out of faith or so God will see me well.
There's a lot there, Mike. But I'd say take your frustrations. Elijah prayed out of frustration. Moses, Jeremiah, John the Baptist, Paul. Jesus modeled it in his humanity because he was fully human and fully God. Hypostatic union. It's another theological point that George and I have talked about in the past. But take your frustrations, your grumbling to God. Period. End of story. I mean, he can handle it. What are you talking about? He can handle it. I mean, bitch to him, gripe to him, just go straight to him. Talk it through, wrestle, you work out your salvation with fear and trembling. This is real. We think that when God created us, he knows our tendencies, he understands the sin patterns, he understands us better than we understand ourselves. Don't be disrespectful to God, don't get me wrong, but vent to him. I've had some tough talks with him. He's not pissed off at me. He's crazy, he's batshit crazy about me. And I think he appreciates. I know he appreciates it. And so, and if you go through Jeremiah 20, and see the roller coaster Jeremiah is going through. He's a prophet. He's speaking for God, talking about the people of Israel, people not keeping their covenant with the Lord, and he's a mess. Moses is a mess. He's bitching about in Numbers 11. I didn't give birth to these people. They suck. Can't feed them. I can't do this. They suck. I stutter. He's bitching about everything. If you love me, kill me. Elijah said the same thing. Elijah's killing all kinds of prophets. For whatever reason, Jezebel scares the shit out of him. I'll ask him when I see him. And he just wants to die too. David's, Psalm 51, he's repentant of all his crap that he did. He committed murder to cover up adultery. Read the Psalms. Go through the Psalms. David is working it out with fear and trembling, but he's going straight to God. So those are the conversations we need to have with people and walk. Just prayer is just talking with God. You don't have to be formal about it. Just talk. That's how Davi do it tonight, and I will do it tonight. We'll just sit down together. She'll either lay on my chest or hold hands, and we'll just talk to the Lord. That's it. Pray for
Amen.
people. We have a list of people. Pray. Well, guys, look, I guess we'll wrap it up. Anything else?
Yeah,
Before
no,
we
that's
go?
it.
All right.
That's it.
All right. I wanted to keep it short and sweet. It's my wife's birthday. So, again, happy birthday, my angel. And Carlos, I don't know. He said he was going to watch, but I don't know. My friend Jason Zamora was watching. He wants me to blow him a kiss, but then his wife will get jealous. So I'm not going to do that. But God bless you guys. Have a wonderful week. Next week, George and I will hopefully be back. If you guys have any suggestions, topics, send in a message or make a comment. Tyler will be checking them, and we'll go from there. Thanks for joining, guys. Have a blessed week.